The Timekeeper's Burden. The Earp Brothers. The dusty streets of Tombstone, Arizona, stretched out before me like a maze of faded memories. I had seen places like this before, towns on the edge of chaos where the future of history was written in blood and gunpowder. But today, my mission was clear, and the stakes were high. Wyatt Earp. His name was already etched into the annals of American history. The gunfight at the OK Corral, the Vendetta Ride, it all hinged on him and his brothers, Virgil and Morgan, along with Doc Holliday. But now, something was about to change, something that could erase their legacies before they were even written. I stood in the Tombstone post office, leaning casually against the counter, while the postmaster rummaged through a stack of letters. I had a feeling there'd be a post for me today. The universe had its way of getting messages to me, even if it had to go through the postal service. "Well, what do you know? Got a letter for you, Mr. Elijah," the postmaster finally said, handing me an envelope with a slightly amused smile. "Family worries, huh?" "Mama worries about me," I replied with a chuckle. The postmaster smiled, nodding in that knowing way only a family man could. I pocketed the letter and stepped out into the dusty street. The wind tugged at my coat as I opened the envelope, my eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. "They're planning to kill Wyatt Earp. You must stop it and make sure it's never known." I glanced around the town, my mind racing. The Earp brothers were already embroiled in conflict with the Cowboys gang, a notorious group of outlaws led by Ike Clanton. The gunfight at the OK Corral had already taken place, and the wounds from the battle were still fresh. Wyatt's brothers, Virgil and Morgan, had both been attacked in the aftermath, Virgil crippled and Morgan killed. It was a brutal time, and tensions were high. The Vendetta Ride was yet to come. But this note was different. History had never recorded an attempt on Wyatt Earp's life at this stage, which meant this was something new, something that could change everything. I found Wyatt talking quietly with Doc Holliday at the edge of town. Wyatt, as always, was stoic, his piercing blue eyes scanning the horizon for trouble. Doc, leaning against the hitching post with a cigarette hanging from his lips, seemed more relaxed but no less dangerous. I approached casually, nodding to both men. "Morning, Wyatt." "Doc." Wyatt glanced at me, tipping his hat slightly. "Elijah. Anything on your mind?" I hesitated for a moment. Telling Wyatt outright would be dangerous. I wish I could have done something to save his brother Morgan or help Virgil, but that wasn't my job. I could not reveal the future, only to make sure it happened the way it should. But Wyatt was no fool. I had to nudge him in the right direction without making it obvious. "There's talk going around town," I said carefully, my voice low. "Word is the Cowboys aren't finished with the Earps yet." Wyatt's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Doc took a long drag from his cigarette, squinting at me through the smoke. "They never are," Doc muttered. "The thing is," I continued, "it's not just talk this time. They're planning something big. Something that involves you." Wyatt looked at me sharply. "What do you know?" I couldn't say much, but I needed to plant the seed of doubt. "Just be careful, Wyatt. Watch your back, especially when you're alone. I hear they might try to ambush you when you least expect it." Doc exhaled a thin stream of smoke, shaking his head. "You don't have to tell us twice. We've been dealing with these snakes for years." Wyatt's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the gears turning in his mind. He was already cautious, but now he was on high alert. He gave me a short nod. That was what I needed. The next few days were tense. The town buzzed with gossip, and Wyatt was rarely seen without Doc or his remaining brother, James Earp, by his side. But the ambush was coming, and I had to make sure it never happened. I followed the movements of the Cowboys closely, blending into the background like I always did. They were planning to ambush Wyatt on his way out of town, near the outskirts where no one would see. I trailed a few of their men, noting their patterns, until I had the full picture. One evening, as the sun began to set, I saw my chance. The Cowboys had gathered near a deserted trail, waiting for Wyatt. I had to act fast. I approached the group casually, tipping my hat as I walked past. They barely glanced at me, too focused on the job at hand. In a split second, I palmed a piece of parchment and dropped it where I knew they'd find it. The parchment was a forged note, supposedly from one of the cowboys' informants, warning that the Earps were onto them. It wasn't elegant, but it would do the trick. The key was to place doubt, to make them think they were walking into a trap. It worked. Minutes later, I watched as the cowboys scattered, muttering curses under their breath. The ambush was over before it even began, and Wyatt Earp would live to ride his vendetta. The following day, Wyatt and Doc were in good spirits. They didn't know what had happened, and that's how it needed to stay. The town of Tombstone was alive with its usual activity. I walked down the main street, satisfied that history had been preserved and that Wyatt's Vendetta Ride would happen as it was meant to. But my work was far from over. As I passed by the post office again, the postmaster stepped out, waving a letter in his hand. "Mr. Elijah!" he called out. I stopped, and he caught up with me, smiling warmly. "Another post. Mama must be worried again." I took the letter, nodding as I smiled back. "Yeah, I reckon I should make time to go see her," I replied. The postmaster chuckled before heading back inside. I stepped into the shade of an alley and carefully opened the letter, my breath catching in my throat as I read the message. "Go to London. You will be needed in November 1888 in Spitalfields." My mind raced through the timeline of history. Spitalfields. 1888. I could barely breathe as the date clicked into place. A shiver ran down my spine as I whispered the name that sent chills through the ages. "Jack?" I whispered, the word barely leaving my lips.